Hey, gang, this week's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Hey, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free now at linkedin.com/goodseats. That's linkedin.com/goodseats to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And now, here's our show.
Blue collar, a shot and beer place. But today, it is a city with a new image. Not steel mills, but steel and glass skyscrapers and almost 3 million people. And during its 20 years of transition, Pittsburgh has remained an avid football town. The Steelers of Mr. Art Rooney, Harris, Green, Swan, and Bradshaw are household names here. But now the city has begun a romance with the Pittsburgh Maulers of the United States Football League. One of the 6 expansion franchises in 1984, this afternoon the Maulers are making history. Their first game in Three Rivers Stadium is a paid sellout without promotions or giveaways. More than 57,000 tickets sold. It came as a surprise. Not even the president of the Maulers expected a full house.
Well, we're a little bit surprised that we were able to sell out. Some people are. There were various predictions as to how many season tickets we would sell and how many people we would have at our opening game. But we were able to, early on with our marketing surveys, identify a demographic of people who have been precluded from season tickets in this market, obviously because of the Steelers. The Steelers began to sell out in 1973, and if you wanted to see them live, you couldn't do that.
The Maulers were not an immediate box office attraction. Stadium lease wasn't approved until late November, and by early January, only 6,000 season tickets had been sold. But things changed dramatically when owner Edward DeBartolo signed Heisman Trophy winner Mike Rozier to a multi-million-dollar contract. Rozier gave the Maulers instant acceptance, instant credibility. Suddenly, there were long lines at the ticket window, 5,000 season tickets sold in a week. Advertisements urged people to buy their way into future sellouts now. Flashy television commercials said the same.
It's coming. March 1984. USFL action comes to Pittsburgh. The Maulers' historic first season at Three Rivers. Call 642-2067 and be a part of Pittsburgh sports history.
Today's sellout in Pittsburgh and the Maulers' sale of nearly 20,000 season tickets is quite an accomplishment for an expansion franchise. Right now, the Maulers are a curiosity. But if any town is willing to support a team built around one big-name player and a coach whose name is Joe Pendry, it may just be Pittsburgh. The question is the same in every USFL city. It may be easiest to answer here. Will Pittsburgh support the Maulers?
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Hey now, how's it going, everybody? It's your pal, Tim. And yes, indeed, you have tuned in to the only show that we know of that spends its week focused on what used to be in professional sports. We like to call it Good Seats Still Available. Welcome to the proceedings. Thanks for finding us. And we do indeed hope that your quote-unquote new year, doesn't feel so new anymore, is going okay. I think okay is just okay. It's probably the new fantastic, this okay feeling. And it's okay to feel okay, I guess, given all the stuff that's going on around our crazy world these days. Hope you're staying safe and healthy, and I hope you're still hopeful about pro sports and all kinds of sports and that kind of stuff. It's a linchpin, I think, for us and our little world here that we've crafted for ourselves as we look at things that used to be defunct and previously domiciled and relocated and all that kind of stuff. And sports, we miss it. We have missed it. We don't want to see it go away or get locked down again. And one of those things, interestingly, this week is actually something to, we think, look forward to. We've kind of hinted at it and had a couple of conversations about it, but it is the rebirth, if you will, or at least the borrowing of previous name from the thing known as the United States Football League, the USFL. It's coming back in some interesting form or fashion, owned by Fox Sports and going to be domiciled in Birmingham, Alabama, we think, come March, April couple of months down the road, lasting through, I guess, the beginnings of the early summer. And that's our conversation this week around actually one of those teams. Now, I thought it was interesting, the 8 franchises that they've resurrected for this new USFL. I understand Birmingham, the Stallions, of course, where they're going to be housing these 8 teams for the entire season, sort of in a bubble kind of fashion. Supposedly, they're going to go into the actual cities that are named, perhaps next year or the season thereafter. We'll see. Houston Gamblers, I get the Tampa Bay Bandits for sure. The New Jersey Generals, for various reasons, a name that you remember and maybe perhaps want to bring back. The Michigan Panthers that won at all one of those seasons. The Philadelphia Stars that won at the other 2 seasons in the USFL. But and the Breakers, I guess the New Orleans version, although that was an interesting franchise to bring back, given that they were domiciled in 3 separate cities in each of the 3 different USFL seasons. New Orleans being, I think, the second of those. And that's the version they brought back. But the curious 8th team in this new resurrected USFL is a head scratcher. And that's our focus this week. It's the story of the original Pittsburgh Maulers. Now, it's a curious, if you remember your USFL history, the Pittsburgh Maulers were literally a one-and-done franchise. They only lasted the 1984 season, and we're going to get into the reasons why they were not an original franchise, but in the second year of the league, and also why they didn't carry on for the third and ultimately final year, with our guest this week, Tom Rooney. Now, if that surname sounds familiar to you, Rooney, well, it ought to, right? Especially if you're from the Pittsburgh area. As the Tom's last name implies, yes, definitely related to the legendary Rooney family of the Pittsburgh Steelers fame. As a matter of fact, Tom was the nephew of the great uncle Art Rooney, the founder, president, and longtime owner and family entity behind the legendary Pittsburgh Steelers franchise. And Tom has been running Rooney Sports and Entertainment for many years and has a wealth of experience. And as we get into our conversation, was part of the Maulers' 1 year of existence in upper management, working for the DeBartolo organization. Edward DeBartolo and Steve DeBartolo and very well-known and deeply rooted in Pittsburgh lore, not only in sports, but as a mall developer, real estate. Hence the name we'll get into our conversation. Maulers, a play on that name. Interesting choice of words, I guess. But Tom regales us with some fascinating bits and pieces of the story of how Pittsburgh got into the mix, into the USFL. Hint, hint, DeBartolo wanted to make it happen. Tom getting a job with the DeBartolo organization, actually at the insistence of his uncle, Art Rooney. And interestingly, once DeBartolo's sights were on getting a USL franchise, putting it in Pittsburgh, the elder Rooney not taking very nicely to that, to the point of almost feeling like he was kind of stabbed in the back by a Pittsburgh USFL franchise, kind of interloping on the football heritage, if you will, of the Steelers organization. And this actually became a real issue as, interestingly and ultimately erroneously, the USFL gear shifting into becoming a challenger to the NFL with a fall season, at least envisioned for 1985. That even became more bitter in terms of Messrs. Rooney versus DeBartolo. But along the way, this story of the Pittsburgh Maulers is an interesting one. It's full of folly, full of curiosities. From the very beginning, the very first home game at Three Rivers Stadium on March 11th, 1984, a little bit of a hint there with Jim Lampley from then ABC Sports in that clip that sets this up for us. That was a little bit of a sort of preview. This is before the actual game actually happened. as to how Pittsburgh would take to this new USL franchise, the league itself as well, being such a Pittsburgh and NFL city. As we now know, it was the only sellout in the Maulers' brief history, that game against the Birmingham Stallions. And depending on who you ask, it was either because of curiosity and a brand new franchise. It was Mike Rozier, the franchise player, and people basically wanted to come and see him do his thing in the USFL, not unlike a Herschel Walker or some of these other big names that were drawn into this league. I think a lot of people, though, would say they kind of showed up to throw snowballs at Cliff Stout, who was quarterbacking the Birmingham Stallions and the longtime backup to Terry Bradshaw in Pittsburgh. And not many Pittsburgh fans sort of lovingly welcoming him back, so to speak. And just the opportunity to kind of unleash their dislike and make life miserable for Cliff Stout. So, but that's just the scratching the surface, and a lot of just fun and interesting and curious and humorous and not so humorous little stories with Tom Rooney talking about the original Pittsburgh Maulers. God almighty, of all the franchises to bring back, maybe the Washington Federals maybe would be the other head scratcher. I'm glad they didn't do that per se, although I thought the Washington Federals logo was great, but they too were quite the, shall we say, challenged team. The Pittsburgh Maulers finished with a 3-15 record, for God's sakes. And by the end of their run, I think their last game against the Bandits in June of '84, they only drew 16,000 and change rattling around there in Three River Stadium. And we talk about Three River Stadium before we get into it. We want to thank Dave Finoli, our previous guest, talking about the Pittsburgh Civic Arena. There is a book out. It came out. Actually, it's about 2 years old now. It's called Three River Stadium, A Confluence of Champions. It is written by the same entity that came together to create that Civic Arena book, called the Association of Gentlemen Pittsburgh Journalists. Doesn't really roll off the tongue that easily, but it's a wonderful name. And Tom Rooney has a little chapter in there, not a little chapter, a pretty significant chapter, about the Pittsburgh Maulers in this great book that talks about the Pirates, and the Steelers and various concerts and other kinds of events that happened in the legendary, I guess, some might, all multi-purpose stadia you would call as legendary, but certainly have tons of memories for Pittsburgh sports fans for sure. Three River Stadium, A Confluence of Champions. That's the book. We'll tout that at the end of the episode, but that's the excuse to have our new pal, Tom Rooney, here on the big show, talking about the Pittsburgh Maulers, of all things, the original version. It's coming up in a few moments' time. All right, so let's celebrate, shall we, with some commerce and some sponsors this week. And remember the 1 year wonder, and I put wonder in quotes, of course, of the Pittsburgh Maulers. So how about a few sponsors that might indulge you and help you reminisce in high fashion, shall we? Let's start with 417 Helmets. 417helmets.com. That's 417, the word helmets.com. Collectible helmets and more. That's our pal Judd Lasher. And if you'd like to find and get a beautifully crafted in that sort of off-kilter purple with orange and white stripes and that cool Pittsburgh Mauler logo on a mini helmet, a Riddell, or I think it's Riddle or Riddell. I never knew how to pronounce it. But the 1984 mini helmet in Riddell or Riddle fashion, it's high quality stuff. It's about as game ready as you're going to find. It's just the fact you can't put it on your head because it's a mini helmet. But in terms of its quality and its hard plastic and design, it's the real thing. It's the real McCoy, and it is yours at 417helmets.com, as well as all kinds of other tons of cool, customizable and collectible helmets. And a promo code for you there at 417helmets.com. The promo code is Good Seats, and you're going to get 10% off all of your purchases there. So check them out. Once you're done there, head on over to streakersports.com. Streakersports.com, they are the purveyors of sports culture, and you will find not just one, but two, count them, different approaches to great high-quality T-shirts featuring the Pittsburgh Maulers. One is a nice, gorgeous purple, light purple with Pittsburgh Maulers name emblazoned on it and that hunky steelworker logo guy in the middle. And then the other one is more of a sort of an off-white with a Pittsburgh Maulers lettering on there with the helmet featuring said hunky steelworker guy. And that helmet, of course, is in purple with orange trim and all of that. Two great shirts amongst the, seemingly hundreds of awesome shirts from all kinds of sports and leagues and memories from sports at streakersports.com. Promo code there is Good Seats. And you're going to get 15% off all of your purchases there. And last but not least, spin on over to our pals at royalretros.com. That's Dustin Alameda and friends out there in beautiful Portland, Oregon. 503 Sports, they call themselves the king of throwbacks. And rightly so. royalretros.com. 503 Sports is the sub-brand, and that was what they were previously known as. But there, not only are you going to find a couple of T-shirts devoted to the Pittsburgh Maulers, but also your chance to get a custom-made, authentically crafted, and highest quality, of course, Pittsburgh Maulers USFL jersey. Get your name on the back, your number, whatever you'd like, the logo and all that stuff. Comes in the home purple or the road white, or is it the other way around? I don't know. I'm sure they mixed it up a little, but all sizes and styles that you might like with the official 503 Sports USFL throwback logo in there. And again, that's royalretros.com. And your promo code there is SEATS, S-E-A-T-S, for 10% off all of your purchases there, including that awesome looking Maulers USFL jersey. So can you imagine getting yourself this jersey and then hopping on down to Birmingham and watching those Pittsburgh Maulers games? For sure, you will get on those Fox television broadcasts or those NBC television broadcasts because you'll have a Pittsburgh Maulers jersey. How many of those are floating out there? Guaranteed to get you on television as you go to watch a few Maulers games there in Birmingham this inaugural second version USFL season coming up. All right, let's continue to get ready. Let's enjoy the conversation. It was a wonderful one, a fun one we had just last week with our new friend Tom Rooney. Let's talk about the original Pittsburgh Maulers, shall we? All right, USFL version number 1, football coming your way. Let's go back to Pittsburgh. Here's our conversation, please. Enjoy. The stories of old, you think they're sort of dead and buried, or they're rediscovered or unearthed, but they keep coming around again in some way, shape, or form, and no more curious than the supposed, or at least attempted reincarnation somewhat of the USFL, a league that only existed 3+ years itself and had a whole host of issues and challenges and debacles, if you will. And the highest of irony, right, was when the original announcement started leaking out that the guy behind the Spring League was going to sort of get some of these logos and these trademarks and all that kind of stuff. And lo and behold, one of the teams of the 8 chosen of the, I don't know how many teams there were in the life of the USFL, maybe 20 or so, you would choose one of perhaps the most lamentable franchises. No disrespect to our friends in Pittsburgh, but the Pittsburgh Maulers were not necessarily on the top of people's minds when, looking back on the USFL's original history, but yet here they are reincarnated again. So let me ask you this question. How do you feel about that? And maybe we can go through some of the trauma and help you out.
Sure. Thanks. Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the logo. And of course, the logo ended up being a really popular animated, TV commercial with us. So the guys behind the reemergence of the USFL or the rebirth probably looked at what they thought would be the best logos because, maybe that couldn't translate into merchandise sales. But, the USFL, the one we remember in the 80s, wasn't a bad idea. I mean, spring football as a development league, when the idea first came out, I remember saying, NFL Europe's failing, but the idea of a spring development league is still a really good idea. And I think it could have evolved into that, but, there were certain people, and one of them being a former president of the United States, that was very heavy-handed with, his own desires of what he wanted to do. And that's been well stated in a number of books, including the One Buck League and others, where they just tried to force their way, into a competition. I guess they thought it was the AFL, and NFL back in the, in the early 60s. But I think, again, I think a development league could be a good league. I envision it as, being in cities where there weren't NFL teams, because there's plenty of those. But even in a place like Pittsburgh, I mean, we sold over 20,000 season tickets. But our problem was, as soon as the decision was made to go into the fall, which they never really did, they sat out the spring and we're going to go into the fall. Well, once they won the antitrust suit, because it was a $1, judgment, then it was over.
Well, let's back up a second. So why don't you maybe tell our audience a little bit of some of your history with sports, and in particular in Pittsburgh, because most people who are downloading and listening to this episode this week will recognize a surname that perhaps seems a little memorable, curious, and there's a wonder whether there's a relationship there. So I'm sure I'm not the first.
So yes, I was raised in the football Rooney family. My dad worked in the ticket office. My brother was a scout. I end up, not following sort of the family business. I had a lot of opportunities, especially in the racetracks they had, because I actually started my career in the horse racing business. But I ended up working for the DeBarlo Corporation, and we were taking over privatizing the old Pittsburgh Civic Arena in 1981. We had, the Penguins and, soon to draft Mario Lemieux. And we had the indoor soccer, and I was responsible for everything from heavyweight championship fights to concerts to wrestling to roller derby, to you name it. And, the idea of doing USFL team, we had done market research, which we always did, third-party research. And, our recommendation to Mr. DeBarlo, who seemed to be very interested in doing the USFL, was that he not do it, because we felt that, there would be too much pressure on stuff we were already doing. The time of year, the games would be in frigid, conditions in most cases, and then they'd roll into the start of baseball season. For all those reasons, we decided not to do it. But there was only one vote, and that vote was by Mr. D. We call him Edward J. DeBarlo. And he felt, and he said later on, that he felt that, if it was going to come to the market, Pittsburgh was his market, and he had to protect, his market. So we did, we did very well. We didn't have a very good team. We had the misfortune of signing Mike Rozier, but Mike had been injured in the Orange Bowl and, no chance to rehab, came right out of college football, Heisman Trophy winner, and he was injured. He was damaged goods by the time he got here. And then, we had a series of other, personnel mistakes. And, but we were all set for year two. And, we were ready to stick it out. But once the league decided to go into the fall, then that was just going to be it. That was not tenable, for anybody. And that's why the league doesn't exist anymore. But I enjoyed working, the name Maulers was picked before we even really had a chance to have a name the team contest, because Edward J. DeBarlo was known for his malls. He had some 80 around the country, his shopping malls. And of course, somebody said to him, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool to call the team the Maulers?" And they used the maul, the swinging maul, which would have been used in the steel industry and the iron industry, and that became the name of the team.
Well, let's back up for a second, because so I think for our audience, it's important to understand this. We're talking about Ed DeBartolo Sr. Versus Junior, obviously became a sports guy in his own right. But at the time, right, you mentioned Pittsburgh as being his market. Well, certainly for the stuff that you were involved in, for sure. But on the football front, he was already entangled, shall we say, with this little team in the NFL called the San Francisco 49ers, right?
Yeah, but they had multiple entities. They owned racetracks, and they were able to say Mr. D Sr. owned the Maulers. Eddie Jr. Owned the 49ers. Different corporations, and nobody really kind of fought that. It was it wasn't the greatest argument, but I guess it sort of won. So that's And of course, the 49ers were just beginning to, win their 5 Super Bowls, right? That was, in the 80s, and, Bill Walsh had come, and Joe Montana from Pittsburgh, by the way, had come. And so he was busy with that. So we ended up, in those days, teams in the NFL and MLB mostly played in multi-purpose stadiums. And, where both baseball and football teams played, obviously in opposite seasons, except for maybe in September or, in playoffs or World Series. But the stadium was open, from, mid-January to when the Pirates played. And there was no way that the Steelers could have stopped, someone coming in and renting the stadium from the city and county that owned it, Three Rivers. They wouldn't have any excuse not to do that. So they actually, tried to prevent the team from coming in, but that wasn't a case they could win. So the USFL played in a lot of, stadiums that were stadiums that also had, other, like in Philadelphia or in, that had other Baltimore, that had other NFL and or MLB teams.
But there was real controversy, though, right? I guess, especially amongst football insiders in the NFL, I guess in particular, about this, even though there was sort of this, distanced, walled off, DeBartolo senior assets and junior assets. The reality is that the de facto understanding, right, was essentially this was a bit of a head scratcher ownership for a USFL franchise because, in essence, there was essentially an NFL owner somewhat in the mix, right? And alarm bells somewhere along the way.
Yeah, well, I guess it was protected enough legally that look at today, Tim. If you'd have told me 10 years ago that the announcers on games would be talking about betting lines, they would be saying, well, the Rams are ahead by 3, the point, 3, and that's because gambling has been so, introduced from a sponsorship standpoint and a funding standpoint, into the NFL. I get a big kick out of hearing, Romo and Nance talk about what the line is on a game during a game. That would have never happened 10 years ago. So, things just evolve over time. I don't think it's a case that, the NFL teams know they could win. They did seem to fight it with the DeBartolos. Mr. DeBartolo was well known for doing things when he wanted to, do things the way he wanted to do things. So there wasn't a battle. I actually worked on some 49er projects. So, for some of us, it was kind of a thin veil, between the two. But, I guess it wasn't around long enough to make, that big of a deal. And it's only coming around again, I think, because of the spring ball. And of course, they have their own, TV contract, right, with Fox. And, be really interesting to see, there's seems to be an insatiable appetite. And, I'm reading Beano Cook's book right now. They published a autobiography of his posthumously. It's called Haven't They Suffered Enough? And, he always said that, the betting line drove everything. When we had an indoor soccer team, he said, we will make it once there's a betting line on indoor soccer games. So, gambling, drives everything, but never more so. It doesn't have to be hidden anymore. It's very transparent with all the money that's coming from gaming into the major leagues.
Well, so what do you remember of the lead up to this franchise sort of coming into the market from DeBartolo's interest and no room for suggestion? He was gung-ho about doing it. This was in the second year of the USFL, which was already starting to show some cracks, but was certainly adding some franchises already, right? Which is
right.
In hindsight,
well, the thing we came up, I think, with an ingenious theme, which was be a part of Pittsburgh sports history, and it was a thinly veiled threat that if you didn't buy season tickets now, you would be like trying, what the Steelers, were from the standpoint of, the long waiting list for Steelers season tickets, right? So we, people were very curious about it. Plus, we had the luck, I guess. I don't know if it was designed this way, that, Cliff Stout, who was the clipboard, quarterback behind Terry Bradshaw, he signed with Birmingham. And when our first home game is with Birmingham. So we sold that game out. And, we just powered on. I mean, when you work, on a sports team, anybody will tell you that there's two seasons. There's the off season and there's the season. And when you're in the season, you're in battlefront mode. You're just dealing with, the next set of variables that are coming, at you. But, for me, it was painful because my uncle, who I was very close to, the chief who founded the Steelers, he even told me, that he felt like Mr. DeBarlo had stuck a knife in his back because, the DeBarlos could not get into baseball. Right there in Chicago, he tried to buy the White Sox, right? And Bowie Kuhn kept him from buying the team because of the alleged gambling ties, owned racetracks. Youngstown was known maybe as a mob town. Well, when it came around to the NFL, my Uncle Art, so he said, really went to bat for Mr. DeBarlo, who he knew from the racing business because my family owned racetracks too, and they did a lot of business. In fact, one of DeBarlo's first malls was called the Randall Park Mall, and Randall Park was a racetrack my Uncle Art owned in Cleveland that he sold to DeBarlo. So that was a little bit awkward, but it came and went so fast.
Your Uncle Art Rooney, though, was he essentially, if you will, brought DeBarlo into the NFL, right? I mean, he
did. He said he was his patron. Yes, that there was trouble with baseball, right? Trying to buy the White Sox, and Mr. DeBarlo was in Chicago with a racetrack there called Baltimore Park at the time. So, he, of course, the Barlows were everywhere. But, yeah, so he felt like he brought them in. And, this is my uncle speaking, that he felt like, that he got stabbed in the back by the thing. But, with Mr. DeBarlo, everything was just sort of the, business. But, this is, when he finally sold, the arena rights to the Penguins after they had won their first cup going into the second one, he made some remark about how much money he had lost, doing everything overall. And I always wondered that, 11 million of that was a throwaway on the Maulers, right? That was the expansion fee and the losses from the first year. And, we were never brave enough to say, Mr. D, we told you so, but, clearly we told you so. So he was smart enough to get out, when they, and then of course they won, as I said, they lost, the lawsuit that was geared toward, keeping them out of the playing in the fall. But the judge ruled that they only sued in order to win the antitrust suit. And he said, you win. And by the way, here's $1 for your judgment. But it was trebled. He got $3.
Yeah, famously and infamously. Tell me what you were doing in those days of getting this franchise up and running from scratch. It's from what you write in the Three Rivers book. It's clear that there was obviously some borrowing and shifting of resources from other DeBartolo teams.
Oh yeah, well
teams,
I was VP of marketing, so I came up with the advertising campaigns, and I was responsible. Tim Pearson, who was our VP of marketing for the Maulers themselves, we developed all the ticketing campaigns. I worked with a fellow named Bill Strong on all the sponsorships. We went after all the people who weren't Steelers sponsors. If a Steelers sponsor was one bank, we went after another bank. If one was Coke, we went after Pepsi. If one was Bud, we went after Miller. There were a lot of people who were left out, by the exclusive contracts that any sports team would do. And so it was actually kind of easy pickings from that standpoint. I'll tell you a story, though, that I didn't put in the book, I don't think, about that just sort of illuminates how crazy the year was. We gave away a car every game through a sponsorship with a major manufacturer. I think it might have been Chrysler or Dodge. And we would call the winner, and by law, people had to be able to mail in. They didn't have to be in attendance; they could mail in their, tickets to participate. Well, we pulled a winner. The person didn't come forward. But one of the security guards who doubled as a guard at the Western Penitentiary said, I know that guy. He's serving life at the Western Pen, for murder. So we actually they actually sold the car and gave they gave the money to, I think, the survivors. But that was sort of, that sort of is sort of a testimony or a microcosm of what happened in that crazy season. But I was at every game. We did all the marketing sponsorships. We treated it like, it was the Penguins. And but the sad thing about it is that we had a full staff. We had coaches and sales reps and sponsorship people, all the people that work for us. They came to work for us, and it was just for 1 year. So that's what I feel mostly. And coaches, think about the number of coaches and scouts that lost their jobs across the USFL when the league, kind of came and went.
How about, I go so many different directions. Let's talk about Three Rivers for a second, right? Because you're mentioning facilities, a bunch of facilities in the USFL that were multi-purpose. I cannot imagine that the Pirates were thrilled with having a tenant for now a portion of their season that they used to think that was all theirs.
Yeah, well, artificial surface, so it wasn't hard to convert, and in September, of course, in August, the Steelers would be playing preseason, then regular season games. So there was some bleed over, with baseball. I don't recall that they, had, much to gripe about because, we would, the only Mauler schedule would have been, matched against the Pirates schedule. But in those days, the conversion on an artificial surface wasn't really hard to do at all. So, it wasn't that much of a burden for them. Maybe we impacted them on sales because we did so well early. I don't know how we would have done if we would have continued. But we didn't have a very good team. I think what were we 3-13 or something like that? Or, it wasn't a very good team.
The vaunted Washington Federals that year for the worst record in the league.
Oh, that's right. And I remember, I'll never forget going, the Washington team was, I didn't really, so when the Maulers folded, somehow for that third year, and I'm still not sure how, we ended up working with the Baltimore Stars. And the reason is we had our Penguin Farm Club was in Baltimore, the Skipjacks. And so that was another team that I oversaw and that we did the marketing for. And somehow we ended up, with the Baltimore Stars. But the Baltimore Stars were a team that played in D.C. because they played in College Park, and they practiced in Philadelphia because they were still under the lease in Philadelphia to use Vet Stadium. So they were so the only championship team I think I ever worked for with the Baltimore Stars. And for a year after, I still had the USFL trophy riding around in my trunk because we were using it for commercials. And I don't know who called, somebody, called and, wanted to know if I still had the trophy. And I looked, and among all the soccer balls, because I was also a soccer coach, there was the USFL trophy at the bottom of the trunk.
And nobody seemed to mind you borrowing it for that period of time?
No. Well, we borrowed it for TV, to use in TV commercials. So, it's just, what a league that, what a disaster. Probably hundreds of millions of dollars that were lost. And again, I think when they went into the meeting there in Chicago to vote whether they would stay in the fall or keep or stay in the spring and go in the fall, there were only two guys, Chicago and New Jersey, our ex-president, who wanted to go head to head. But the problem was they had a disproportionate weight with the markets they had, and Jersey had Herschel. So, they called the tune, everybody sort of folded under everybody was browbeat by those guys.
Well, tell me how this team kind of fared, I guess, in the marketplace, right? You're mentioning the first game, obviously curiosity, a sellout crowd at
Sure.
Three Rivers, but First of all, how much time did you have from when DeBartolo said we're a go and we're in to opening day, right? Which was when? Early in the spring, it would have been.
Yeah, that would have probably been in February. Probably we were given the team, this is a while back now, right? So it would have been at the end of the first, USFL season, which would have been in July maybe or June when the season ended, because it went from, spring to or winter to late spring. So it would have been about that time. So, we probably had about 7 months, but we already had, an organization in place from the standpoint of, ticketing and sponsorship. And it was something that from a management standpoint, we took on, and then hired staff to support it. So it wasn't like doing it in a vacuum. You know what I mean? We were probably better geared to do it than maybe some would, because we just sort of used, the same strategies or the same media partners, the same ticketing programs, even some of the salespeople, were because we had the soccer team too. So we were, we had a lot of people working for us. So it wasn't as a big of a lift. I remember though, we in early, there was a restaurant in a hotel that was called the Carlton. It was called the Ruddy Duck. And we would go down there almost every day after our regular work day to sort of work on the Maulers, and usually a couple drinks into it, right? But I remember our general manager, projecting that, we thought we would be a 500 team. But if we went and got Mike Rozier, that we would be a playoff team. And, I felt bad for Mike because he was hurt when he came. He had a decent NFL career, but he didn't have a Heisman Trophy NFL career, right? That you think about. But it went off the rails, pretty quickly. We also had a coach that was, a first-time ever head coach, and a young guy, and I think he just kind of folded under the pressure. So, Mr. DeBartolo, he was your, I would say typical sort of hot-blooded Italian, very very loud and very, very opinionated.
Yeah, his way or the highway, I'm sure, right? I mean,
he was very passionate. I loved the man. I thought he was great. I had a great relationship with him. I mean, he was a player. He called himself. He was a gamble. You build a mall, that's a gamble, right? You build a racetrack, that's a gamble. But he was. I think what happened was he realized that was his idea, and there's no way we could, start saying, well, Mr. D, we told you this, this wasn't going to work. But if we still wanted to be working the next day, and we had,
you actually mentioned in your article, right, that even the naming of the team, right, was you guys did through all the hurdles and the perfunctory efforts to name it and see what the fans might be and name your team contest, and he was like, nope, Maulers, that's it, right?
Yeah, it was it. And then he let us go through the charade of a naming rights where we, picked 5 or 6 names. We had to guarantee that the Maulers would be one of them, and then he would pick the name. We had sold the sponsorship to Burger King for the name of, team contest, had rolled out all this stuff. And so I convinced him to let us do it, even though, the logo was already done. Everything was just totally predetermined, but he fancied the idea of promoting, owning the malls, and owning the 49ers. I know for the DeBartolo Corporation, when they would go in and pitch to do a mall in a certain, area of the country, and they might be competing with somebody else to be the developer, they could say, how would you like to go to the Super Bowl? How'd you like to go into the locker room? That the 49ers were a tremendous sales toll for the DeBartolos. And so, they and of course they were very, very successful. That wasn't a very good franchise, when when Eddie Jr., took it on. I don't think they had won much at all. I don't think they had ever been to a Super Bowl. And of course they would win 5, they would be kind of the team of the 80s, I guess, and do very, very well.
All right, what's this? LinkedIn Jobs. Hey, these days it can be hard to find and hire the right candidates for your small business. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs made it easier to find the people that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 770 million people. Holy mackerel. I added that part. Focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience and use screening questions to get your role in front of only the most qualified. Then, use the simple tools on LinkedIn Jobs to quickly filter and prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/goodseats. That's linkedin.com/goodseats to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And now, back to our conversation. One thing that strikes me is that you mentioned early on that you were quite successful in the season ticket drive early on for the inaugural quote unquote season, but it's startling to look at the statistics in raw numbers. See that first home game, which was the third regular season game, a sellout of over 53, almost 54,000 in Three Rivers Stadium. And not an uncompetitive team. I mean, the first game was a loss by 4 points. The second game away to the Panthers of Michigan was a 3-point loss. So you were clearly coming into that game competitive. And obviously with Cliff Stout, the former Pittsburgh backup, right, it's certainly a known entity, right? But to see the drop-off from that sellout, I mean, the next game, literally 2 weeks later, was not even half of that, 24,000.
Right.
And it didn't get any better from there, did it?
No. Well, what happened is, those counts were, if I remember correctly, actual attendance. I mean, people bought season tickets and didn't use them. One of my memories is when we had Herschel Walker come in. We thought this is a really big gate attraction. We sold a lot of tickets. It was Easter Sunday, and it was raining. And I was standing down by the gates at Three Rivers on the inside, not getting wet, but as people were coming, they were coming in, getting a program and turning around and leaving, because they wanted the program, right? The memorabilia, folks, right? The people that collect that stuff, right? They came in and hundreds of people were buying a program and turning around and leaving. And so, and the season tickets were not that dear. So people took a flyer on it. And then, it's like anything else, Yogi Berra used to say about a restaurant, nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. In this case, the crowd came for the first game and nobody went there anymore because nobody was going there anymore. It all sort of, fed on that. So, and then, the Pirates were pretty good. They had won the world championship in '79 and they still had the remnants of the team. And, people just, Pitt had great teams in the Big East at that time. And, people they just forgot about it. They dismissed it. I think we did research and I think we thought we could sell maybe 12 or 14,000, maybe a little more than half of the season tickets the following year. But, we never really got there. So
when did you start to worry about things generally? I mean, by that Easter game and only 14,000 or so officially attending that game, which I think ironically was the lowest attended game of the season. That being on national ABC television back when ABC was kind of a thing, or made,
And that was part of it too. The game, I forgot the game was on national TV and it was raining, and again, that didn't represent the number of tickets sold. That you have a real problem when you've got that percentage of no shows. But I think it was a combination of Easter Sunday, the rain, the game was on TV. But it's amazing how many people came through. Again, when you're running a sports franchise, you're sort of just, if you're sort of the general in the field in a battle, you wake up the next day and you're just dealing with the next issue that comes. We always thought there would be a second or a third season, and we would have dealt with it, accordingly. But, we were, when that meeting happened in Chicago for the vote about whether to stay in the winter or try to compete in the fall, that was really a shock to all of us, because, a straw poll of the owners thought, that we talked to all thought that, they should stay, where they were, in the spring. But of course, the two most, if our New York owner said, I'm going to take my ball home, I'm going to take my ball and go home, and, and the game's over, that's essentially what, he threatened to do.
So walk me through that sort of that situation, right? So obviously the season was not a rousing success on the field. The average attendance actually was, in the low 20,000s or so, which is respectable, right, for a quote unquote expansion franchise, even though the league itself was only 2 years old, right? And the team was relatively competitive, being on the losing end of more than its fair share of games. So, and seemed like there was a commitment, right? I think there was even going to be a new head coach coming in from Green Bay. So what's happening in the off season, and how does that vote sort of influence the decision not to play in the spring of '85? Was it assumed to be, once that vote happens, that it would just be a lame duck exercise that wouldn't be worth it for anybody because there would be no '86 season because they're not going to go in the fall? Or why wouldn't you at least go through that process of playing an '85 season in the spring and figure out maybe some value for the franchise to go elsewhere, perhaps?
I think that it was more of a legal play than anything else to try to catch, the NFL in, an antitrust situation. So if they'd have gone into the fall, they'd have gone head to head at the very same time with the NFL teams having to, that would have never worked because the teams practice on their own field, right?
Well, so that, certainly in Pittsburgh. No, I understand that, but I'm just wondering on the springs. '85 was still going to be a spring season before the jump to, right. I was just wondering why maybe Pittsburgh wouldn't.
Well, I think because by then they had already gotten the ruling on the lawsuit, the antitrust suit, because the antitrust suit was, supposedly to blow everything open, and once they knew they couldn't win that suit, they just decided, to roll it. And I think people had enough losses at that time, and they just, who knows, I certainly wasn't around for the start of the USFL, although again, I saw it as an opportunity for it being a development league because I knew that NFL Europe was really struggling. And I thought the league could use a development league because unlike, let's say hockey or basketball, you can't have 18-year-old kids, come right out of high school and play, football. They're not physically ready yet. So a development league would have made some sense. And by the way, this is what this new USFL still could be. It's going to develop coaches and players and scouts and personnel. So it's going to be a good opportunity. Although it's weird because they're playing all their games in Birmingham. This is like the penitentiary football team, right? They play all home games.
They're talking. They're saying that by year 2 or certainly by year 3, they will domicile in their respective cities. I'm hugely skeptical about all this for various reasons. But let's play it out for a second. You're the native. How do you think a Pittsburgh franchise plays out in Pittsburgh? I mean, do they play in Heinz Field and 60,000 seats? And
ostensibly they could. Remember, these stadiums, if they're publicly funded, are owned by governmental authorities. Like in our case, it's the Sports and Exhibition Authority. Now they sublease the management of these purpose-built stadiums like PNC Park and Heinz Field, to the operating team. So it would be interesting, to see, because we do a lot of concerts at Heinz Field in June, July, and August, but we certainly don't do them, before then. So there really isn't anything at Heinz from, the end of, the football season until, probably at least, June 1st. So ostensibly, it might work. And again, if it's seen as a development league, it's possible that these teams, this league could be embraced as a way to get get these players more defined and refined. Because right now, there is no NFL Europe, and I don't think Canadian football is doing very well. So where do these people, where these young folks, get the opportunity to play? So I guess, this is largely a TV play. Right? Stadiums and arenas, we work on them all over the country in our business. They're getting smaller, not larger. You can't beat 5G at home to watch a game, right? Why would you pay $10 for a beer or $13 for a beer when you can sit in your man cave and watch it? I think that's where we're headed, for the sports to be much more of a broadcast, experience than, even though the scoreboards at the stadiums or the video boards are just outstanding. I was so impressed Monday night, because typically in Pittsburgh, a Monday night game, is going to have, the lowest attendance of the year. The Steelers are sold out, but the lowest, drop count, the number of people come through. And you add in the fact that it was January, right? But of course it was Ben's, farewell. And I understand in the secondary market, the tickets in the upper decks were going for $200 a piece. So that's a great tribute, I think, to Ben. So I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. There is still, there aren't, people, I think especially hockey and basketball are still relatively niche sports to football and baseball. And, there'll be a opportunity for people to watch something else other than golf on the, or hockey or basketball in the spring.
It's interesting to me looking at the eight franchise names that were picked out of the ether to be reincarnated. Of those, I see most of them are teams that had some level of success and arguably had some level of popularity, right? So the Tampa Bay Bandits for sure. Houston Gamblers were popular. Birmingham Stallions. The New Jersey Generals for various reasons. The Michigan Panthers won a championship, and the Stars won two of those other championships, right? How much nostalgia is there for the Pittsburgh Maulers? Let's be frank.
Yeah, I don't know. I think obviously Pittsburgh, and football, are synonymous. I still think it could be the logo. I see people walking around Pittsburgh with Mauler shirts, and they look relatively new, and you can buy them in the store here because the trademarks went into public domain. So you didn't have any licensing issues, and it's a very popular logo. I would be very skeptical that a team would come back in here. Our winners here are pretty brutal. And I think I would be very skeptical that a team would, that would be one of the teams that would come here. So anyway, we'll see. But, Pittsburgh sounds like football, right? So maybe that gives it, some credibility in that, and from that standpoint.
Yeah, I think so. I just, I just don't know. I have a hard time. And look, the XFL is coming back next year, right? Again.
Yeah, right.
Right. So, and I think that, until things collapsed with their, pulling the plug via COVID and stuff, XFL, in a couple of markets, I thought was really punching above its weight. And
yeah,
This does not feel like that to me. If the guts of this entity is really the Spring League, which has essentially been a pay for play, kind of last chance scenario for players who want to have a couple of looks for a couple of months and maybe get onto a taxi squad or then some, right? So, the cynic in me is, and look, you're talking to somebody who's endlessly fascinated with all these teams and leagues that aren't around anymore, and benefits, frankly, from this stuff coming back, right? Because people talk about it more and want to listen more and talk about it more. It's great, but right now it feels like it's slapping on some logos to something that supposedly is supposed to start in a couple of months and only has 5 head coaches and no rosters, right? So, we've seen this story before, right? And not just football.
I think you need to look at it through the context of this is really a 10-segment Netflix series. That's what this is. You know what I mean? This is TV programming. This is studio football. I don't know how many people are going to, keep showing up at Birmingham. I mean, how many games could you go to down there? So, this is all about content, just all about content. And what can be delivered and competing for that. So I think that's the gist of this. This is like watching a series on Netflix. So an astute. Although it has a line, see if it has a line, which it will because it's football, that'll be a whole different element to it. If it has a betting component. So people bet on anything.
Yeah, and I think those are 2 astute points, right? But what I worry though, of course, is about the players, and they're always the last ones, sort of on the totem pole, the first ones to get hurt, even with well thought out, intentions like the AAF did, right? To have them being part of the ownership kind of thing and having bonus structures and all that kind of stuff, all the right things, right? And even that, for various reasons, sort of. So, I want to be hopeful. I don't think I'm even cautiously optimistic. I think I'm just cautious generally. But, will I watch? Sure. Because I'm interested. I'm curious. It's hard not to look at new stuff like this, just like I did with the AAF and the second coming of the XFL and the first coming of the XFL, for that matter. But you want to talk about betting lines? Let's talk about how long this league lasts. I don't know. I'd probably take the under, frankly. But
Yeah, I think you're probably right. There is probably enough availability of players and coaches. There's how many Division I colleges are playing 130 or 140 are playing football. So there's certainly inventory, and if it's competitive, it might be interesting to watch. But I don't. I think, but if we're looking at this, trying to compare it to one of the older leagues, we're in a different era when you consider the 2 major things, which is the proliferation of paid television, networks like Amazon and Netflix and others, and gambling, which, used to be, something that was whispered and now is something that is, brought way out into the open. So those are the things, fueling this. And, we'll see what happens in this era of those 2 things, of the drive to create content, in the insatiable appetite of people who own, channels to get content, exclusive content, and then, for people to bet on it. You can bet, no pun intended, that, the largest, the betting entities that are out there, they'll be all over this thing, because it's just going to be, more stuff for them to throw lines over.
Yeah, there's a sucker born every minute, I guess. So, all right. So
yeah, probably.
I thought you sort of hinted at it, but I guess I'll just ask for the definitive answer. If the USFL had stayed in the spring, number one, do you think it would still be sort of around, and or do you think it certainly would have had a little bit of a longer life and built its niche for itself? And then number two, would Pittsburgh still be part of that mix?
I think that if it had decided not to compete with players and to be a development league, almost under the umbrella of the NFL, the way NFL Europe was, right? If it had been satisfied with its own role in that, that it could have survived. And even in Pittsburgh, with the lower expectations of what that, product would be. I mean, Pittsburgh hired, the Maulers signed a Dallas Cowboys quarterback. That was, Pittsburgh fans hated the Cowboys. Glenn Carano was probably, not, the greatest selection there. But yeah, I think if it said to itself, we'll be a development league, we're unlike having to go over to the pond, we'll be here. This will be much easier to do. And, we'll stay in the spring. Maybe we'll do a 10 or 12 week schedule. We don't need to play 18 weeks. We'll pick the prime times to do it. I think it could have stayed. It could still be here.
Well, there you go. What other podcast will you get a Glenn Carano reference?
Yeah, I've mentioned. Yeah.
Than this one. Tom, this has been great. What are you up to these days, and any lessons from your USFL experience, or have you tried to bury them and keep them buried?
No, well, we do venue development. Recently, we worked on Robert Morris's new arena here for their basketball team. We've done work all over the country for new arenas and music venues, a lot of music stuff, because that's one of my primary things. I think, what I always tell people when they come to an idea, and I had a call today with somebody that was new, I said, you don't make your niche, you find your niche. And that's what's critical for something like, a spring league. Okay, there's a niche there, right? That makes sense. But what are you going to be? You're not going to be able to go head to head with the NFL and compete for players. But you could be, you could be a development league. You could be a AAA. Think about it. I think the NBA has done a good job now with, with their minor league.
G League.
The G League, because I think they're bringing their teams. A lot of them are coming into their own marketplaces because they're not even looking at, trying to develop them as a business that supports itself. They're looking at strictly as developmental. So, and we've worked on a number of, like in DC, we worked, they have a G League team. We worked on the arena there. And, I think, if you look at that, you think of it as strictly a line item on your expense sheet for development. And I think that's what, these new leagues should look at what their niche is and not try to force their way in. They tried to do that. They tried to take on the NFL. They weren't the first. They won't be the last. I'm talking about the original USFL, but that's not where that they were going to succeed. They've been much better being not so much idealistic and much more. Okay, how can we become a part? Imagine if they could become a part of the NFL as sort of a development league, a AAA league, with a lessened schedule, with smaller amount of players, maybe, not even worry. I mean, if you had a team like that was Pittsburgh branded, and you played in Heinz Field and you played 7 or 8 games a year, I bet you, and it was Steelers branded, I bet you get 30,000 people a game for that, because people would look at that as, it would be low price, right? You're probably talking about a, $20 ticket or something for that. Bring the kids, that sort of thing. I think that's the number one thing we preach is, find your niche. Don't try to force it, because you might have something that's, starts off well, but it's, chances of it having any long-standing, benefit probably aren't there.
Yeah, look, I also think too that there's some, there probably some parallels here. Say what's going on in basketball, right? So there's some, alternatives now to college that are sort of really pop up, right? And there really isn't an alternative to college football, really. The G League arguably is an alternative pathway into the NBA, right? Either a little bit of college.
Well, and even in baseball, with the reduction of the number, we do a lot of stuff with with minor league franchises, and baseball's moved away from one time teams had 13 affiliates. They were 13 levels of baseball, going way back, and now baseball has said, look, we're going to let colleges develop this talent for us. We're going to have these dream leagues. They're basically wooden bat leagues. We've been doing a lot of that lately. The kids are preserving their ability to go back and play college in the fall. They're not being paid. They're on their parents' medical plans. There's a lot of stuff that's happening in sports that's evolving that way. So as I said, with NBA, G League, they're sort of bringing these teams back, not thinking of them as their own sort of, mini, franchises that can, turn a profit. They're more oriented to how are we going to support, our major league team. So football doesn't have that right now. And that's something I still think it could have.
Fantastic. Who knew that we could spend an hour and change talking about a team that lasted barely a year? In the original USFL, we did it. I didn't do it. Tom Rooney did it. He was the guy there. He was the one regaling in all of it. And you can read his chapter about the Maulers, the one-year wonder, 1984, from the awesome book called Three Rivers Stadium, A Confluence of Champions. Tom Rooney, being the part of the Association of Gentlemen Pittsburgh Journalists, the same folks who brought you that awesome book that we featured in a previous episode with our pal Dave Finoli about Pittsburgh's Civic Arena. It is published by the History Press. It is available wherever good books are found, and one of the best and easiest and most helpful and supportive ways is to access the referral link on our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search up this episode number 246. My goodness. With Tom Rooney, the one you just heard. And you'll find a nice link, convenient link, an easy link to the book. You'll be whisked away to Amazon. You'll save a couple of bucks. You'll get it about as fast as you can humanly get it. You'll get it in Kindle form, paperback form, whatever you want. And it's just probably the quickest and easiest and most helpful way for you to get it. But, however you want to get it, you want to go to your local bookstore or find it elsewhere, but by all means, but just get the book. You're going to enjoy it, especially if you enjoy reminiscences about not only Three River Stadium, one of those sort of multi-purpose donut-type stadiums. You either love it or you hated it. But the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Pittsburgh Steelers and lots of other stuff that happened there in beyond just the magic 1 year of the Pittsburgh Maulers. It'll be interesting. We'll see how the USFL 2.0 plays out. We'll see what the new version of the Maulers looks like. See if they get a coach. I know they haven't even named that yet. I don't know. We shall see, shall we say. Follow us on social media. Why don't you? At Good Seats Still. That's where you'll find us on Twitter. Good Seats Still Available. That's where you'll find us on Instagram. And at Good Seats Still Available on Facebook as well. If you want to send us some email, please do so. We're at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And we've got a little weekly email newsletter. Sign up for that on our website. Just tool around there, goodseatsstillavailable.com. You'll find it. Name and email address. That's all we need. And boom, you are immediately put behind the velvet rope and with the in crowd, shall we say. What else? We tip our Pittsburgh Maulers purple and orange hat from the Wayback Machine in our general direction of our pal Jerry Payne. Jerry Payne Audio Excellence. Thank you, kind sir, for your knob twiddling once again. Appreciate that. And thank you so much for listening, not only this far, but all our episodes in the past. And thank you, of course, for rating and reviewing us wherever you can, as well as telling your friends about us. We appreciate that too. All right, we're going to leave you with a little audio from some of the music that you might have heard on those Pittsburgh Maulers television commercials. Hope this brings back some memories. Take care. We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.